Another year draws to a close, and feelings of festivity, reflection and appreciation are upon us. And it's at times like this that I really enjoy sitting back and remembering all the films I've seen this year. Now obviously it's a very standard thing for critics and whoever to compile lists of the best and worst movies of the year. But unlike all the other critics on YouTube, I've actually found the worst movies from this year. Everyone else seems to go for the same typical obvious choices, looking at the mainstream films which didn't quite meet everyone's expectations, or simply just focusing on the movies which scored desperately low on review aggregators like Rotten Tomatoes. And while I'm not challenging anyone's integrity as a critic, this is pretty effortless work. So while they all sit around regurgitating the exact same comments about how Gotti's narrative was incoherent, or Robin Hood was a tonal nightmare and really boring, or I Feel Pretty was just a dumpster fire of faux feminist virtue signalling, and while I agree, yes, Gotti wasn't that great, and yes, Robin Hood was pretty terrible, and yes, Amy Schumer is the least humorous person on earth.
Talk about how fat you are and how you want to have sex with guys and then say, my vagina a lot.
These movies are nothing compared to the absolute shit that I've forced myself to sit through this year. The main problem with review aggregators like Rotten Tomatoes are that the scores are never accrued on a level playing field, and so don't correlate with one another in the way you'd imagine. Say hypothetically a mainstream movie comes out with a big named star in it. Naturally, all the critics are going to want their opinion heard, so they'll write a review. The movie doesn't quite match their bloated expectations, and despite the fact the overall quality of the production is very high, the whiny little bitches cry about it, give it less than satisfactory reviews, and drag its overall score down into the gutter, which sometimes results in a 0% rating. There have also been instances of movies which are clearly absolutely dreadful, but only receive a handful of reviews from some smaller critics who either had appropriate expectations or were simply just being more merciful, which helps to bolster a score which is entirely disproportionate to the movie's actual quality. At the same time, a lesser known movie starring some vague smudge is released, and it absolutely sucks and has no redeeming values at all. But due to its lack of mainstream appeal, the self-important critics don't even bother reviewing it, meaning that only a very few select smaller critics write it up. And in these cases, it doesn't even garner enough reviews to accrue a score, and therefore gets no attention at all, flies under everyone's radar, and fails to even be acknowledged as bad. This means there's a whole plethora of movies which are almost impossible to find without specifically looking for them, that are light years worse than anything making its way onto everyone's worst of the year lists. And so, in the name of justice, I've put myself through absolute torture to bring them to you in a more palatable format. Please be warned that some of these movies are so terrible that you're really going to regret knowing that they exist. Also note, they aren't in any particular order apart from number 1, as they're all so awful in their own unique way that it would be like trying to compare the overall persuasiveness of a series of emails drafted by a drugged bear. Also, to be eligible for this list, the movies in question had to at least be commercially available, otherwise this entire list would be filled with independent East and West African movies, and while that would be quite funny, it would get boring very quickly as they're all a very similar type of terrible. And they aren't exactly fair game, given that the industry from this region has only really been putting out legitimate content this side of the millennium. They haven't really had much time to hone their craft.
What the fuck?
First up on this ridiculous list, Lake Fear 3. I can't think of a single positive thing to say about this movie. If you were to tell me that this was made as some sort of comprehensive guide of how not to make a movie, I'd believe you. The writing feels like it's the work of some angsty teenager who thinks they're being profound and thought-provoking, but it just ends up being really cringy.
For generations, people have been searching for the answer to the afterlife.
The camera angles are all skewed and odd, but not in any kind of meaningful, deliberate way. It just feels like all the shots have been framed at random, which draws attention to irrelevant objects and makes me feel like I'm having a stroke. The editing is so distracting and full of jump cuts, it must have been done by somebody who's only worked on shit pop-punk music videos from the 2000s, as the motion keeps speeding up and slowing down without any purpose. Every shot is desperately too long and tells you absolutely nothing more than you would have gathered after a couple of seconds. They just drag everything out to the point that it becomes so incredibly boring that it made me feel really irritable, like I just wanted to get up and walk away from the film. It's like they've taken all the basic principles of filmmaking and deliberately refused to conform to any of them. And the audio, oh my god. The ADR is so terrible, I'm not even convinced that it's the on-screen actors' voices that you can hear.
She lost around here, well, she did.
Sound effects that have been added are completely out of time with their on-screen action. And any voice that was actually recorded on set either has this horrible echo from the location,
This is rock bottom.
or the microphone picked up so much background noise that they've been forced to layer it with a cocktail of white noise and sound effects.
We never had anything in common.
Oh god, it just sounds like and the acting. Oh my god.
What are these people? Where am I? What's this place?
And who just wears a suit vest on its own? Where's the rest of his clothes? So what I can gather from the distorted and headache-inducing dialogue is that these two ladies are looking for a missing girl, and so enlist the help of Vesty McVestface, who's some kind of mystic. On their journey, they bump into a guy from the previous Lake Fear movies, so he can explain the entire backstory with the aid of some of the worst animation I've ever seen. Who did this? So, what exactly is the backstory to Lake Fear? There's a spooky demon that eats people. That's it. That's the entire backstory. There are so many technical issues with this movie that I'm actually kind of glad the story is so basic, as it's almost impossible to figure out what's actually happening. Especially because the final half of the movie is almost completely shrouded in darkness. You can kind of see characters vaguely writhing around, but it's really difficult to determine what they're trying to do or what's happening. So they're in a house and some kind of long penis thing is trying to drag them into a television. I have no idea why or what this means. This movie fails so miserably to establish any of the characters and the plot that I have no idea what anyone's motivations are or even just generally what's happening.
And you, mister, or missus, you're gonna get f***ed up.
So I don't really care when Vesty lays down for a bit and stops moving altogether. I initially assumed he was just tired from all that overacting he was doing, but he doesn't get up and we never see him again, so I guess he's dead? And then the bloke from the previous movies fires his gun, and it's over. What the f*** is going on? So then the movie ends on what I assume is a cliffhanger.
What do we do now?
We fight.
Based on the dialogue and music, it certainly feels like one. And I guess another instalment is kind of justified given that there are quite a few lingering unanswered questions, like, where's the girl that they were looking for? Is Vesty dead? And why is this called Lake Fear? There isn't even a f***ing lake. Next up on this list, sent straight from hell, The Punished. Despite how clearly dreadful this movie is, I actually kind of enjoyed watching it and spent pretty much the entire duration sat there with a really stupid grin on my face. I just couldn't help but laugh at something in every single scene. The story centres around this chunky German dude named Wolfgang, who's essentially just a 99p store Schwarzenegger.
Where is James Thompson?
Except this film really smashes conventions by making him the villain. Ooh! So he does lots of villainy things like putting on a spooky mask and senselessly murdering tons of unnamed characters. I'm certain he has some kind of goal or motivation, but that's never ever made clear. I have no idea who these men are, what they're doing, or why he's killing them, but you know, he's a villain, so yeah, reasons.
I have my reasons.
He also has a penchant for ending scenes by smouldering off into the distance. But he's not all bad and seems to make exceptions for children, sparing them so they can live long, prosperous and parentless lives thanks to his kinder side. He regularly visits hospitals to get healed up after a long day filled with murdering people, and whenever questioned about his injuries, he has a foolproof alibi.
I fell.
During one of his visits to the hospital, he conspires with a terminally ill orphan, deciding that he should take her out for the day because reasons.
I have my reasons.
And the hospital is more than happy to discharge this child into a stranger's custody that very same day. I can't imagine they would have been able to conduct the necessary background checks for this to even be an option, but whatever, he seems like a nice enough man.
Do you have a shark
Just get in the car.
Now, you may have been under the impression that you were watching a movie, when in fact you're actually watching a series of adverts. Firstly for Turtle Bay Exploration Park, where you can go for a long walk, visit the splash zone, sail on the lake, drive a jet ski submarine, be stalked by a beefcake assassin, visit the museum, look at the fish. Wait a minute. Don't worry, Wolfgang is already on the case. He's far too alert to be caught off guard by this throbbing wad of a bloke. The fight scenes in this film are hilarious, complete with cartoon punch sound effects to really round off this badly choreographed and uninspiring package. The movie then tries to position Wolfgang as some kind of heartthrob, showing a woman so stunned by his overwhelming sex appeal that she accidentally falls into a swimming pool. But in reality, he's just a bang average looking barrelly man. He takes some top secret German bad guy phone calls.
Hallo?
Which are so top secret that they've neglected to add subtitles, so all of us in Salafa can't understand what he's saying.
Ja, und wir haben einen neuen Mitspieler.
Why is he holding the phone so far away from his ear? So this movie likes to delve deeply into the duality of Wolfgang's character. From a scene of him passionately choking someone to death with a gorgeous smoulder on his face, to a scene of him spending some quality time with the ever-increasing group of females who find him to be irresistible. The young girl he abducted, a female employee from the adventure park who just now hangs out with him all the time, and the hospital administrator who is now also here for some reason. They all take some time to relax by the pool wearing very little before starring in some adverts for some more local attractions.
Wow, look what Wolfgang got us.
Firstly, it's the Jetovator, the world's first water-propelled flying bike by Jetovation Inc., who have been a pioneer in the hydroflight industry since its inception back in 2011. And Rare Air Trampoline Park, which provides a safe and clean environment with one-of-a-kind jumping fun that all ages can enjoy. Honestly, the cinematography in this movie makes it look and feel just like an infomercial. So, due to the contrasting natures of Wolfgang's professional and private life, this movie poses quite a few questions. But don't worry if you weren't quite sure what these questions are, because there's a very feeble narrator here to dictate precisely what you should be thinking.
He's a murderer. Are these girls even safe with him? Is he forgetting who he is?
The movie wraps up with Wolfgang and who I presume is the narrator chaining a man to a tree and covering him in sauce so that wild animals can come and eat him. Yeah?
Don't do this to me!
And the film closes perfectly with a shot of Wolfgang smouldering off into the distance, holding his phone too far away from his head. This film is objectively terrible, and although I enjoyed it, it still needs to be punished.
They'll tear me apart! Oh, God, don't do this! Don't do this to me! You can't!
Moving on. Imagination Land. This film is the spiritual successor to a fantastic movie released last year called Horseplay. And although that might sound like a questionable porn subcategory, because it probably is one, it's actually just a movie about an animated horse flying around in a plane asking a cross-section of ugly-looking characters horse-related questions. Imagination Land, however, is a movie about an animated horse flying around in a plane asking a cross-section of ugly-looking characters non-horse-related questions. They're really pushing the boundaries with this one. I can't emphasise enough how ugly and mismatched all of these character models are. There's even two completely different interpretations of what a pig should look like. These must just be from some free-to-download garbage resource site. And just for a little perspective on this, I've found a 3D model of a basic cartoon pig, which is 1,000 times more palatable and easy to look at than any of the shite in this movie. And it only costs a measly $12 to purchase a full commercial licence to use. You don't need to resort to these horribly inconsistent and awful looking character model. What is that? It looks like the accidental offspring of Patrick Star and Daphne Gilfin after a weekend locked in a seedy motel room drinking household products. So if we can try and get over the appearance of these ugly characters and focus more on the content of the movie itself, more specifically the story that it's trying to tell, which coincidentally is an absolute nightmare as well, because the plot is essentially a meta-evaluation of the movie itself. I know that sounds really bizarre, because it is really bizarre.
Everyone has a piece of the plot, you know.
Plot?
What the story is about.
But the characters are aware that they're in a movie, and they're flying around discovering this movie's story, which is the story of them flying around discovering the movie's story, which is the story of them flying around. I'm a little bit worried that this might not actually be a bad movie, but instead a grossly misunderstood work of genius.
I'm not here to be a main character, just a minor one.
But unfortunately, I don't have the patience nor enough autism to deconstruct the philosophical meta-narrative put forward by this piece of contemporary art cinema.
This story isn't that silly, and I kind of like the dialogue.
And I'm certain that none of the children, which are its presumed audience, are prepared to enjoy this kind of experience either. So who exactly is this film made for? It's definitely marketed towards children, but I'm a fully grown pizza and can't even begin to comprehend what the creators were going for in this aesthetically offensive mental nightmare. On a more serious note though, this film.
What do you think of this?
Next up on the shit list, Dead Squad, Temple of the Undead. Who names these movies? Dead Squad, Temple of the Undead tells the true story of a disgraced Nazi scientist whose favourite pastimes are waving confidential files around for everyone to see and injecting soldiers with a serum he's developed that bestows them with the ability to expel a thick red soup from their mouths. Unfortunately, this serum has some unintended side effects, causing the soldiers to become hyper-violent and hungry for human flesh. What a shame. Many years later, a group of insufferable dickheads arrive at a holiday resort just in time for happy hour. What is it with these bollocks films feeling like some sort of corporate promotional video? After a few cold ones, they decide to completely ignore all rational sense and take a raft downriver into uncharted territory.
It could be fun.
Where they discover a delightful spot with some awesome water.
The water's awesome!
While the attractive characters writhe around in the waterfall and the two nerds awkwardly sit fully clothed facing away from each other, their raft gives up waiting for them and decides to just head home, leaving them stranded.
Oh no!
Their only option is to trek through the jungle and find their way back to civilization.
I don't want to walk anymore!
And surprise, surprise, they find a temple. For absolutely no reason at all, the gang give up trying to find their way back home and decide to instead let their most intelligent member make the decisions.
We need to take shelter in the ruins.
Oh right, yeah, because this is a true story, so this is just what happened, I guess.
This is lit!
No.
Oh god, please kill these characters right now. You look about 30, why the hell are you using the word lit unironically? So despite the fact they all have to catch flights home and they have no food or clean water and it's still daylight outside, the gang continue to journey further into this horrible dirty temple. The only rationale for any of this terrible decision making being their seemingly irresistible urge to check things out.
Let's check it out.
I'm gonna go check it out. Hey guys, check this out.
I guess we better check it out then.
Let's check it out.
Check it out.
Check it out.
As they reach the furthest depths of this ancient temple, they find relatively modern technology, and without any regard for consequences or anyone's safety, they begin wildly flipping switches and pressing buttons. Bored by all this nerdy technology, the attractive ones disappear off so this movie can get its dose of unnecessary nudity, in an attempt to reinvigorate its presumably bored audience. The owner of the holiday resort then reveals, in some dialogue to himself, that he is in fact the son of the Nazi scientist and is seeking guidance on how to continue his father's legacy.
Vater, what should I do?
Oh no. Meanwhile, Anisha is grabbed by a creature and thrown into zombie jail, where her excellent combat abilities come in very handy as she dispatches all of her new undead cellmates, stealing a finishing move from Dead Rising. The gang decide the best way to find Anisha is to split up.
You two stay here.
And so, one by one, they meet their fate. The hot one gets molested until Daddy Zombie turns up and rips her jawbone off. Then he rips her boyfriend's head off. And so, to keep up the succession of ripping through people like packets of crisps, he decides to do an excellent combo finisher move on John, removing his skull through his abdomen.
Fatality. This is lit!
No.
Meanwhile, the nerds manage to swiftly escape into the exposition room, which is filled with story-related items all neatly arranged and prepared for them to peruse at their own leisure, including an old video of the Nazi doctor clearly and concisely summarising his life's work to bring everyone up to speed.
It really was the Nazis.
Then they're rejoined by Anisha, just in time to be repeatedly attacked by zombies for the remaining 20 minutes of the movie. And Daddy Zombie returns, but seems to have stopped tearing people apart like Lisa, and has now opted for a less effective moveset, simply holding people and moving them around a bit. Luckily, before all the gang get carried to death, the resort owner steps in and shoots Daddy Zombie, saving them and escorting them out of the temple. But oh no, it was a double cross. Anisha was working with him this whole time, so she could go into the temple and get a book for him so that
What the f*** is going on?
So Anisha gets shot and the host gets his head reshaped with a rock and the nerds just wander off into the jungle. The end? That can't be the end. Did they survive? Oh, they must have survived, otherwise how would anyone know about this true story? Also, I forgot to mention there's a really messed up subplot in this movie which is just about the more primal habits of the undead, including several instances of zombilingus. This movie is not lit.
Fatality.
And next. A Place in Hell. This was originally released in 2016, but for some reason it's been re-released this year, and during my research I found a few people who weren't particularly happy about that. But I'd just like to show you guys the kind of passionate response that some people have had to this movie.
I wish I could sue Walmart for selling this piece of garbage.
Why do you treat me like this? Why?
Absolutely the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life.
You're disgusting, you're filth.
There is literally not a single redeeming aspect to this movie.
I wouldn't even make a serial killer watch this, because not even they deserve to be put through that kind of torment.
Clearly directed and produced by a dyslexic autist with Down syndrome.
You make me sick!
I am a huge fan of scaring myself while watching horror films. A Place in Hell was a breath of fresh air. Not many horror films can grab me and keep me on the edge of my seat. Lewis Smith's performance was mesmerising. You can tell how tortured the detective is just by the rhythm of nuances sprinkled throughout the film. And the Holly character was funny. I would definitely recommend this film to anyone that is looking for a good time. For me, it was the perfect concoction of horror, tension, and comedy.
I love a good scary movie.
That last review was oddly specific, which makes me feel like it might have been an inside job.
Yes.
So the film tells the story of a group of awful filmmakers who set out to create their own low-budget horror movie. Oh, this feels very meta. I'm having Imagination Land flashbacks.
We'd better finish this story as fast as we can.
But the silly buggers have decided to film near the location of a horrible, stabby, rapey man who decides to stalk them, peeking menacingly at them from around corners and through windows. I'm surprised none of them notice him before it's too late, as he seems to emit a loud chiming noise every time he sees them. This is yet another movie said to have been based on a true story, which I find very hard to believe when so many people are miserably strangled to death, stabbed or bummed, alone with no witnesses. Because if everyone's dead, who told this story? It should just say based on an actual theory. There's also a subtle and nuanced subplot about an alcoholic detective who goes around doing nose shots and indiscriminately slapping people in the face.
Bastard, don't you lay your hands on me in my bar.
But that goes absolutely nowhere. I had wondered what led him into this self-destructive lifestyle, but it's clearly the result of his terrible working conditions. All of the emergency services in this movie are completely incompetent. From a paramedic who thinks it's a good idea to apply bandages over the top of people's clothes, to a detective who's neglected to notice the passing of 7 decades and thinks he's starring in LA Confidential. So stabby, rapey, strangly man stabs, rapes and strangles his way through our pack of idiots, with no intervention from any law enforcement. Until the timid ones shoot him and it's the end. Or is it? If this is a true story, why are you trying to end it on a cliffhanger? He's either dead now or not. There's no maybe about it. Oh god. I'm sorry that this review isn't more extensive, but there's literally nothing to say. This movie is just drab and boring and I won't bother you with it any longer. Let's just send it back where it f***ing came from. And at number 1... Bigfoot. I'm finding it quite difficult to contain the anger I feel towards this movie. I don't think I've ever experienced anything so vapid and soulless before. This is the exact minimum amount of effort required to technically create a movie. And I don't even want to call this a movie, it's a video at best. This is easily the worst thing I've seen all year. It's 82 minutes of characters stood in symmetrical formations talking at one another. Nothing happens, they just stand still and words out at each other at a number of generic locations. I have no idea how any of them got there because none of them can f***ing walk. This is such a zero-effort, pathetic, dire attempt at producing anything, and it's about 10 minutes of editing away from just being characters stood around T-posing at each other. All of the animations are essentially just a series of random twitches and wobbles with no cohesion to what's being said.
You have answered the riddle correctly, Santa!
And the voice acting is piss poor, and I have absolutely no idea what accent any of these characters are supposed to have.
My name is Barloff, and I'm not a cookie. I'm a gingerbread man.
What were they even trying to do? And the faces are so soulless and harrowing, completely expressionless, just staring off into the void as if they're about to commit some kind of heinous crime. And the character model they use for Santa just completely changes halfway through the movie. There really isn't much more to say about the actual media itself, as this is it. Literally, the clips you've just seen are it. That is it. That is the movie. Just characters stood around talking. But is the content of the dialogue engaging in any way? No, it's utter nonsense.
Shamala, Tattleboo, Scrummy Tattleboo, Maha, Kaha, Ranja, Scuttleboo, Mighty Master Scroll.
They just waffle on about about inconsequential bullshit throughout the entire thing. It may seem like I'm disproportionately angry at this movie, but it's not just the quality of the product that's making my blood boil, but the way it's been marketed. This was on sale in a supermarket near the tills at crotch height where kids are going to see it and nag their parents to buy it. The DVD cover is so misleading that it surely can't be legal. First up, the Yeti character, which takes up approximately 60% of the front cover, isn't even in the film. And the box is emblazoned with stars and chock full of quotes from critics giving reviews which I can't actually find anywhere, drawing comparisons with the likes of Shrek. Off. Shrek has some competition this year. This must have been said sarcastically or taken completely out of context. There's no way that anyone with enough fortitude to be able to string together a sentence would ever consciously draw that comparison. This quote is my absolute favourite though. You know, sometimes critics like to earmark particular notable movies to draw a comparison and help the reader imagine the style or themes of the movie based on their understanding of other works. Like this example from The Machinist, which states that it's Fight Club meets Memento, which really does help to illustrate the gritty psychological drama which unfolds in all of those movies. Now, Bigfoot has a similar quote on its box, which is Bigfoot meets Father Christmas. That's just the plot of the film. The creators are reaching so hard to try and validate this steaming pile of that they've started adding quotes that aren't even representative of its quality. They're literally just finding anything that's been said regarding this movie and just slapping it on there. So I reached out to the critic in question, who explained that this was a quote taken directly from a trailer reaction. They hadn't even seen the movie. You can't mislead people like this. This is a outrage and I will not stand for it. So I returned to the store where I found the original and bought all the copies that they had left. Hey, do you have any more copies of this film?
No.
So it's just these two?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I'd like to encourage anyone out there that sees this abomination on sale anywhere to do the same. So no more children have to have their lives ruined by this awful piece of trash. And now, with great honour, I summon the power of 2018 and unleash it on this disgusting waste of space. This is the worst movie of 2018, and so it should be obliterated. So what was the worst movie that you saw this year? Let me know in the comments so that I can check it out, because there's a good chance I've missed some absolute howlers. That's it for 2018. Thank God that's over. While I did enjoy working on some of the titles in this list, there were many, many others that I watched in the process that were very painful experiences. I need to take a little break now to recuperate and prepare myself for the torment that 2019 is going to bring. I just want to say a huge thanks to Vox's Productions, Cynical Reviews, Mauler, Rags, and Memology 101. All of these guys have been so generous and kind to me this year, and have done so not expecting anything in return, which just speaks volumes for them as individuals. I'll continue to support these guys in every way I can, and I hope to one day repay this kindness in full somehow. Huge shout out to my new patrons, Joseph Lewis, Thomas Davis, Grape Bape, Ben Little, and Daniel Hettersheet. They've joined the small group of kind souls who've been helping towards some of the costs of producing these videos, which is honestly amazing. I do want to continue to increase the production value of this series and make things bigger and crazier, and so small donations from people are instrumental in me being able to do that. Also, the official Discord server is now up and running. All links in the video's description. Come and say hi to us. And yeah, have a fantastic Christmas and a messy New Year, and I'll see you all in January.